Good morning, everybody. Everybody is now here, so please settle yourselves down. First of all, welcome to this call-in of the Children and Families Scrutiny Board. My name's Councillor Billy Flynn, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. The meeting is formatted slightly differently from the normal Scrutiny Board as follows. Towards the end of the meeting, board members will be asked to formally vote when determining the outcome of today's meeting. There are two options, basically, and motions will be required as to which of those options that you have, or in fact, two motions can be raised, basically, and a vote will be taken. We'll go into a little bit more detail on that later on, but just to give you an idea at the start of the meeting, okay? I'll go around the room to my left as usual. Could I restrict this first element to the members only, please? And we'll go back for a second round with officers. So, starting with Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Councillor Oliver Edwards, representing Guiseley and Rawdon.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Karen Renshaw, representing Councillor Robin Hood.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor David Jenkins from representing Killingbeck and Seacroft.
Morning, everybody. Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Raymond Jones, representing the Horsforth Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson, Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
I'm Emma Flint from Wheatwood Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Mahaley France, Mayor for Moortown and Meanwood.
Good morning, Councillor Ankila Manaka from Bermondsey and Richmond Hill.
Councillor Ed Carlisle for Hunstanton and Riverside Ward.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Mark Dobson, Garforth and Swillington Ward.
Hello, Ryan Stevenson from the Harewood Ward.
Morning, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley and Yeadon Ward.
Morning, everybody. I'm Rob Clayton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, again, starting with my left, if we officers could introduce themselves.
Good morning, Nicole Walker, Legal Advisor to the board.
I'll come in now. Councillor Helen Hayden, Executive Member for Children and Families.
Richard A. Forge, Legal Advisor to Children and Families today.
Phil Evans, Deputy Director in Children's and Families.
Good morning, Amanda Ash, Service Lead for Children's Centres and Little Owls Nurseries.
Good morning, Lisa Thornton, City Development, Strategic Asset Management.
Good morning, Paul McGrath, Children and Families, Change Manager in the Transformation Team.
Hi, I'm Sandra Penteler. I'm Programme and Partnerships Manager in the Children and Families Directorate.
Good morning, I'm Jerry Shevlin, Change Manager in the Children and Families Transformation Team.
Thank you all very much indeed, and a reminder, as is always the case for us elderly people at the top of the table, if you could bring your microphones close to where you actually are speaking and speak directly into them, please. I'd be very grateful. Rob, can I ask you to take us through the first 5 items?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to run through the standard procedural items that we have at each meeting. Item 1 is appeals, Chair, and there are no appeals today. Item 2 is exclusions of the press and public, and there are no items requiring exemption today, Chair. Item 3 is late items, and there are no late items today. Item 4 is declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct, and I will just briefly pause to allow any board members to declare any. I shall take silence as none. And then item 5, Chair, is apologies, and we have apologies from Councillor Heselwood with Councillor Jones attending as a substitute, Councillor Khan with Councillor Thompson attending as a substitute, Councillor Goodall with Councillor Carlisle attending as a substitute, and we also have some apologies from our co-opted members, Chair, Maria Adams, Kate Blacker, Nick Tones, Helen Bellamy and Andrew Graham. That's it from me, Chair, thanks.
Thanks very much indeed, Rob. Just moving on to item 6 now, the substantive item of today's agenda. Essentially, the report explains that the call-in has been received in line with the Council's constitution for these matters. And it's been, the decision itself actually is referring to an Executive Board decision taken on the 15th of October and relates to minute 53 of that meeting relating to the Children's Centres Review, proposals for change in Children's Centre service delivery. The relevant call-in request has been appended to the report, which you will find on page 13 of your pack. Other appended documents, including the Executive Board report and associated appendices and the relevant minute from the 15th of October Executive Board meeting, are there too. I'll now ask Rob to briefly highlight the key items of the key elements of the report that advises on the procedural aspects of it.
Thanks, Councillor Flynn. Yes, you've covered some of them there, Chair, but I'll just go through the key points of that then. So a call-in request has been received in line with the executive and decision-making procedure rules. At paragraph 4, those are detailed. Part of the submission of the call-in is around the principles of decision-making and whether the decision in question referred to minute 53 from the Executive Board on the 15th of October, whether that decision was in line with the principles of decision-making as set out in the Constitution. Today's meeting is focused on that decision only, so it's about the principles associated with that around that decision. So other issues or related decisions are not within focus and shouldn't influence any decision that is taken today. As already noted, there'll be a vote later on as after the questions and the discussion has taken place, and then there are 2 options that are presented to the board following that discussion and debate. Option 1 is to release a decision for implementation. If that is the chosen option, then that would be released immediately and the decision cannot be called in again. Option 2 is that the decision is referred back for reconsideration, and that would go, in this case, to the next Executive Board meeting. If that were the chosen option, there'd be a short adjournment and we would agree the grounds for that, and then a report would be produced to the next Executive Board meeting for that reconsideration to take place. If for whatever reason there is neither option 1 or 2 are chosen, then option 1 is the default position, so that would be to release the decision. There is a recommended structure that the board can use for the meeting. We suggest that the board uses for the meeting, and that's contained in the report in the agenda pack, and the chair will run through that process now. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed, Rob. Basically, yeah, this is the structure of the meeting. I'm not calling people at this stage. I'm just explaining the order in which things will happen. First, I'll invite Councillor Dobson to outline the reasons for calling in the decision as set out within the call-in request form that he's submitted. He's asked for a period of around 15 to 20 minutes today, which I'm happy to provide, and that, of course, will apply to Children and Families officers and Councillor Hayden as well, of course. Could you please, as Rob has sort of emphasised, focus the discussion on the grounds for the call-in linked to the principles of the decision-making, and focus on the elements of how the decision was made and not on any wider issues, please. If you do start to stray, then we'll have to pull you back, I'm afraid. So, secondly, I'll ask Councillor Hayden and Phil Evans, if that's the order in which you wish to respond to the issues raised. And I know you've got a number of senior officers here with you as well, and you're more than welcome to call those in as required. Board members will then be given the opportunity to ask any questions and points of clarification of any of the participants, and that will mean anything that you wish to ask. Everyone will get an opportunity. There is no suggestion anyone will be prevented from doing so. If you want to ask a question, if you want to make a comment, you'll be able to do so. Once the board members have completed their questioning, I'll invite Councillor Hayden and Phil Evans to provide a brief closing comments, having heard the board's discussion, and I will then ask Councillor Dobson to provide his closing comments too. The board will then be asked to vote to determine the outcome of the call-in, but we will go through that again sort of later on. Councillor Dobson, can I please invite you now to outline the reasons for calling in the decision as set out in your call-in request form, Request form can be found on page 13 of the main agenda pack for your notice. Councillor Dobson.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, board members, executive board member and officers. May I thank you for giving me this opportunity to bring this call in regarding the proposed closure of certain children's centres across Leeds. Can I also thank the elected members from across a range of opposition groups who have also seen merit in this call in to bring back for your examination this morning. Today I'll be speaking on the proposed closures and deregistration of premises in their totality, but will be focusing primarily on Garforth and the village's East Centre to draw specific examples of where I and others see the paper as being flawed in their findings and proposed outcomes which were accepted by the Executive Board last month. The proposal to close certain children's centres will negatively impact upon families and young people in the areas concerned, causing problems for those parents and carers and young people who will be unable to access alternative like-for-like provision under the proposed alternatives suggested within the paper. I believe that this is disproportionate and that proportionality has not been demonstrated. The closure of centres highlighted in the paper proposed to be undertaken with the suggested alternative provision being inadequate. Taking Garforth as an example, the centre is proposed to remain as part of the council's estate, but potentially out of the hands of children's services. It could therefore be argued that the removal of provision of service for children and families is not proportionate to obtain the desired outcome and will only result in the costs and associated issues around upkeep of the building being transferred internally within the local authority. This will not result in any overall budget saving when you are looking at the council's budgetary position in its entirety. To close a vibrant hub which serves a large number of the community across a whole range of activities to achieve a saving which is spurious at best, and which will in turn displace those services into settings that are not fit for the required purpose, is disproportionate and is a disproportionate response to the need which I accept to trim the departmental budget. The consultation and the professional advice of officers put to the Executive Board was inadequate in terms of the usage of the centres, specifically around times and use and numbers of groups and partner agencies who access the services at that location. Adopting the gunning principles, the consultation clearly demonstrates a strong mood amongst the public to retain the centres under the threat of closure, and if consultations are to serve any purpose, it must be to inform the decision maker. I believe this has not happened on this occasion. The clarity of aims and desired outcomes remains unclear and are not sufficiently transparent within the report. Clearly, alternative provision cannot be achieved to facilitate the desired outcome for the future of children's services within communities, and it is also unclear where the cost saving will actually be achieved in terms of that broader financial impact upon the local authority. My discussion with the decision makers did not explain in sufficient detail the viability of the options considered as alternative provision, and the details around the reasoning for decision were not fully met. Looking at the cost savings then, the report states that Garforth, as the example again, but please remember I'm using specific examples to highlight what I think are anomalies around the entire paper, is supposedly one of the most expensive centres to operate, and therefore remaining open would reduce the available budget for frontline services. It's also accepted that the department has agreed a £2.45 million saving target for children's services, commencing with a part-year saving in this current year. However, I would ask members of the board to consider the administration's repeated mantra of being one council. How many times have we been told that, as a local authority, we must move away from working in silos? Again, using the example of Garforth, this children's centre would remain part of the council's estate, in line with locality principles and would be reviewed for potential future use. Simply put then, the building must still be maintained, it must be heated, it must be preserved in a standard that leaves it fit for future use. So adopting that one council approach, where is the actual saving to the local authority? In this case, we are simply moving the pieces around the board, and whilst these proposals may indeed represent a departmental budget cut, they will have no impact on the overall council budget, so one can reasonably ask, what is the point? Similarly, with the staffing team, the staff involved will be deployed elsewhere, so there is no saving to be made through the closing of this building and the dissolving of the services from this location. I ask again, where are savings going to be achieved, except as an internal paper exercise, moving the deficit from one column on a balance sheet to another? Chair, board members, there are no savings to be achieved by closing centres highlighted within this report. I am confident this argument can be made for many, if not all, of the centres under threat of closure within the report. I also believe we are underestimating the use of the centres. The report seriously undersells the use of centres. Again, using the Garforth example, the report claims it is used by children's services and family services for approximately 3 days per week and by midwifery and other services. The service, in fact, is used over 5 days, including some evenings. Yes, one could argue, and I'm sure the counter-argument will be made, that it's used by other services, but this is in alignment with the government's ambitions for Best Start hubs. This centre should be held as an exemplar of good practice and certainly not on a list for closure. The argument may be that many of the services provided from the centre do not fall under children's services, but nevertheless, rather than consider closure, surely a more productive outcome would be for the council to look to deliver a more diverse range of services from the centre involving community partners rather than go for closure, which would appear to me to be the easy option. It also, again, flies in the face of our one council ambitions. In terms of health, midwives deliver 1.5 days a week from the centre, development checks take place 1 day a week, and the centre offers private space for more detailed and complex work to be undertaken. The centre is used for preparation birth and beyond programme and antenatal and postnatal classes. Because the centre has a large room, they can occupy around 20 parents along with the family health worker and the 0 to 19 practitioner or the midwife. It would literally be impossible in this meeting to list the diverse range of services that take place over a 5-day period, but a quick run through tells us the Henry programme is delivered online, baby weighing services, social worker teams, there is a family learning facility, the DWP drop-in, a family support and parenting team, community matters, the early years improvement team, and community-driven play and stay schemes. These are just a fraction of the services that are delivered from this hub, and again, I would argue that this can probably be replicated across the piece in terms of the report. It may be the department's argument that these are not strictly within the remit of children's services, but nevertheless, rather than close this centre, surely we should be looking to achieve our One Council ambitions, working with partnerships and these groups to deliver a whole range of services from this location in line with government aspirations and guidance. I think it's important that the board do not think I am attempting to call in an entire paper based on the anomalies around one centre. So I would also like to draw your attention to the village's East Centre at Great Preston. Yes, the centre is only used 3 days a week, but again it's used by a variety of other services already in alignment with the government's ambitions for Best Start hubs. The 0 to 5 hub space is small, but a perfect location for smaller groups to work, and an ideal location on a good bus route to Kippocks, Garforth, Swillington, Ollerton Bywater and Cross Gates. There are concerns that the villages do not have easy access to Rothwell in particular, with some extremely isolated and vulnerable families who would need to travel 5.6 miles or 2 buses. Again, this particular centre has a whole range of activities outside the prescribed remit of children's services, and rather close them should we not be looking at that one council approach and work in partnership with other organisations to deliver a genuinely multifunctional hub in a hard-to-reach location. The space offers groups, meetings and more intimate services like development checks, infant massage and self-waste services. The tiny office is available as a breakaway space for parents that may need a confidential discussion. The office holds space for 3 workers, has access to Leeds City Council facilities and is an ideal base for staff to work and do their write-ups, make reports, take private phone calls or meet with parents, practitioners and families in a centre where privacy is offered and it's a quick and useful resource for workers in the locality. I've been provided with a comprehensive range of statistics as to the brilliant outcomes this centre delivers. Far too many for listing this morning, but I would hope the board see fit to ask the officers to provide more detail around this as part of the outcome of this meeting. The report states that venues such as Garforth Library and Community Hub or the Garforth Active Leeds Leisure Centre could provide alternative space for service delivery if the Garforth Centre was to close. I would ask board members to consider if these alternatives are really viable options when you look at the use of current children's centres in their totality, rather than simply hiving off what could be deemed as the established use of children's centres. Even then, taking the 2 Garforth alternatives as an example, could the range of sensitive services that are currently being offered within the current centre really be delivered within a library? In terms of space, privacy and the massive need for communities to access services in the outer areas, both examples put forward as alternatives simply would not fly. I would ask members to perhaps question the officers present as to how much detail has gone into the work identifying both sets of premises put forward as alternatives and how they would work in practice. I would also ask the board to consider these principles in relation to this decision, especially around consultation. Looking at the gunning principles, I hope it has been demonstrated this morning that the report is lacking in several key areas which I believe would have helped steer any consultation. If the consultation was based on inaccurate or inadequate premise, I would ask if the principles have been fully observed, and I would remind the board of issues the department have recently had to deal with through inadequate consultation regarding Queensway Primary School as one example. The principle states sufficient information. Consultees must be given enough information to give intelligent consideration of the issues at hand. This means the information must be clear, accessible and balanced. Based on research regarding the children's centres under threat of closure, I believe this has not been the case. To conclude then, the 2006 Childcare Act places a statutory duty on government to provide early years care and places the emphasis on parental choice. They must facilitate access that maximises benefits to parents. How does this sit then with closing centres and making access more difficult for many people living in the outer areas of the city? How does the administration reconcile this with the public and professional response from the consultation? Increase online services. Only 22% of the public agree and only 15% of professionals agreed. Aligning local services. Only 37% of the public agreed and only 20% of the professionals agreed. Reducing number of children's centres from 55 to 31. Only 15% of the public agreed, only 21% professionals agreed. How does this decision reflect the statutory duty on government to provide access to such services or demonstrate parental choice where the public and professional consultation show such low approval ratings for the plans? I would again ask the board to consider and reflect on the implications of the gunning principles. To reiterate, although I have used Garforth as my primary source for questioning the accuracy of the paper, I would suggest that if other members were present this morning giving testimony to this evidence to this board, they would be offering forward a range of similar views regarding the usage of centres in those areas already under threat of closure or deregistration. I am therefore asking the board to consider the paper in its totality. Obviously, it is not my job to direct the board, but I would ask, perhaps, that you consider some of the arguments laid out, which I hope would help shape your thinking. We need to adopt that one council approach. I would also suggest that officers genuinely look at the alternatives that have been put forward to fully establish if they are fit for purpose, adopting either a strict children's centre model or preferably a model that involves community partners in line with our One Council aspirations. I'd ask the board to think about employing bolder thinking regarding the rollout and provision of council services, to consider if these proposals will result in any actual savings to the local authority. Ask the department to take a moratorium on the executive board proposals until such time as a full examination is undertaken as to how to best utilise each centre rather than move to closure based on a paper that does not present the full picture as to current use or the need of the facilities under the threat of closure. And with that, Chair, I'll bring my presentation to a close and thank you for your attention and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Dobson. That was 17 minutes, so inside your 20-minute request. Could I ask Councillor Hayden and Phil Evans now to speak on the matter, and you have the same amount of time to cover. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the opportunity to respond to the call-in request. Our Children's Centre offer matters deeply to families across Leeds. This review has taken a citywide view to ensure we deliver a modern, sustainable and equitable service for families. Following extensive consultation and detailed assessment, the proposals recommend continuing to operate 31 centres, which is the largest amount of centres in any local authority area in the country. Formally deregistering 6 historic non-operational sites and closing 18 centres where services will be realigned. Leeds will still, as I said, Leeds will still retain more centres than any other core city. The consultation was robust, thorough and objective. Feedback shaped the final proposals, including retaining centres in rural areas, enhancing digital access and committing to a digital literacy support. Families told us that they were open to accessing services in familiar community settings like libraries and schools, and we've responded to that. Needs today are not what they were 20 years ago. This plan reflects how families engage now with more flexible, co-located and digitally enabled services. It also makes more efficient use of council buildings, prioritising service reach, locality working and modern delivery over bricks and mortar. We can't finalise service details until the footprint is agreed, but we are committed to protecting frontline delivery as far as possible. Those services that Councillor Dobson refers to, there is no suggestion in this paper that any of those services will cease to operate in Garforth. And indeed, they hopefully will be relocated to a more suitable situation. For example, I went to story time in Crossgates Library with my children rather than the Children's Centre because story time is much more suitable in a library than it is, and I know that happens in Halton as well. So savings will come from reduced duplication, management and overheads, not from cutting support available to families. These decisions have been made in good faith, based on the best available information at the time. Any mistakes have been rectified. We've reviewed the data again. The outcomes remain sound. I appreciate the scrutiny and stand by the direction we're taking to ensure families have access to modern and sustainable children's centre services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Phil Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to repeat the points that Councillor Hayden has made for brevity, but there are a few additional comments I'd like to make. Councillor Dobson quite clearly indicates in his introductory remarks that we should be considering this paper in totality, and I'm really, really grateful that Councillor Dobson has recognised that, because what this paper has sought to do is sought to take the Children's Centre service as a whole across the city forward. Councillor Dobson refers to the department accepting a savings target. I think it's probably just helpful to remind the board that the administration and the council set the budget, and therefore the directorate seeks to do everything it can to move towards those targets. That does mean, however, that there has to be savings. That means that the status quo of continuing to operate the services from children's centres as they currently do could not continue. Councillor Dobson refers to consultation being flawed. I think it's important to say that it is a consultation, it's not a referendum. It is asking for people's views, and so that the views of people can then be taken into account in terms of being able to shape the proposals. As Councillor Hayden has said, the paper that came to Executive Board effectively is the start of a process that says, will the council consider how best these services should be delivered as it moves into the future? The principles of that, I think, were genuinely accepted, and I think have a lot of support amongst members. They are about not having an absolute focus on buildings, but having more of a focus on services delivered and outcomes that are achieved. It is about reflecting on that wider one council approach in terms of using locality buildings that may be available in an area, and I think most members will recognise that for many areas of the city there are multiple buildings that are being used, and we need to make sure that we are using those buildings as efficiently and effectively as possible. We have worked with colleagues from across the council in terms of trying to formulate the proposals, and that has included engagement with public health, has included engagement with colleagues from asset management about those proposals. And so what we've sought to do realistically is bring to Executive Board a paper that we do think is proportionate, particularly when you take that wider perspective on how the service might need to be delivered as it moves into the future. I think if we look at any individual centre, there will be a lot of support for that centre being retained. I think the paper very clearly sets that out. I think the paper is very balanced in terms of reporting back the consultation responses, and as Councillor Dobson has pointed out, a number of respondents did not agree with the council's position. However, there were a series of considerations that had to be taken into account when we considered each of those individual centres, but looking at it through that total perspective as to what that service was going to look and feel like. As Councillor Hayden has said, the focus moving forward will be on the delivery of those services. And subject to this decision being agreed, we will move forward with the next piece of work that actually sets out at a much more granular detail how those services will be delivered on a locality by locality basis. It will look different. I just want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear with the board. This is not a suggestion that we can continue to deliver the service as